The Common Core State Standards requires teachers to engage students in reading complex text. But what exactly is a complex text? How is text complexity determined? And what are the problems with how we go about doing that? That's coming up in today's video. Hi everyone, I'm Lee Hall from Literacy Teachers, and I'm all about giving you the tools you need to inspire, motivate, and change how your students read and write for academic success. If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you get new notifications because I put out new videos every week. So today's question is about text complexity, and specifically it's asking, how is text complexity determined? So all teachers have heard about this, it's by now, right? Text complexity is very embedded in the culture and fabric of the public school system, okay? And the idea is that we can take a text, any text, and we can quantitatively measure that text, and based on the results that we get, nobody would say this is 100% accurate, but based on the results that we get, we can sort of have an educated idea about what students would be a good match for that text, particularly on by grade level. Okay, so we can take 100 texts and code them, run this algorithm on them, and come up with these are good first grade texts, these are good texts for fifth graders, these are good texts for eighth graders, and so on. And while nobody would say that that's perfect, would sort of say like this is a decent system to use. That's the argument, right? This is a decent system to use in terms of thinking about how to choose text for students. All right, and then you can think, obviously, if you have a way to measure a text, right? If you teach fifth grade, then you have a way to think about text complexity. You have a way to think about which text might be harder or easier for a student in your class based on if they're reading below, on, or above grade level. Okay, that's like a general overview of what is text complexity, why is it used, what could some possible benefits be. I want to come out and say I'm not a big fan of text complexity. I should correct that. I'm a fan of having kids read complex text, but I'm not a big fan of quantitatively measuring text, assigning them to grade levels or grade bands, and then just sort of stepping back from there. I don't think this has played out very well. So first of all, let's get back to the original question, which is how is text complexity determined? Most likely at this point, you've run into Lexile Levels. That is a very common system that gets used in schools, and it is put together by a company called Metametrics. So you can feel free to check out the Metametrics site if you want. You can Google them; they'll come right up, and they'll have videos, and they'll explain some more things to you. But and they will explain to you on their website how they measure text and come up with these Lexile levels, which tell you a recommendation for what grade level, right, students should be, these texts should be used at. Okay, so Metametrics does a couple of really big things. One, they look at sentence length, and then the other is they look at word frequency, which means within a sentence, the words that are there, how common are the words? So right now, all the words that I'm saying in this sentence are very common. You've heard them all. There's nothing new. Somebody who's wandering into this video who doesn't have a background in education, Lexile level would be a very uncommon word, right? Unless you had children that were in schools or unless you were in education, all right? So texts that have long sentences and texts that have a lot of uncommon words, right? Words that students might not, be expected to be exposed to, are going to have a higher grade level, higher Lexile level, okay, which is going to translate into a higher grade level. Texts that have shorter sentences and that have more commonly used words that you would expect most students to know are going to have a lower Lexile level and thus be seen as being or be ranked as more appropriate for a lower grade level, okay? So I think it's really fun to think about what are some examples of this and how does it play out, okay? Because not all texts that are written with short sentences and common words are appropriate for a younger audience, all right? So if you, for example, Fahrenheit 451 is a really good example. If you've read it, Ray Bradbury, he writes in short sentences with words that most people know and can understand. But the concept of Fahrenheit 451, of course, not appropriate for young kids. But Fahrenheit 451 has a Lexile level of 890, which falls into the 6th grade range. Would you give Fahrenheit 51 to a sixth grader? I'm going to guess you would not. Now, I'm also going to guess that Metametrics would say, you know, you really shouldn't be giving Fahrenheit 451 to most sixth graders, right? That as a teacher, you need to step in and use common sense, okay? You wouldn't be saying, well, I teach sixth grade, so I'm going to get a whole class set of Fahrenheit 51 because it's got a Lexile level of sixth grade and give it to my students. You wouldn't do that, all right? On the other hand, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which is wildly popular with elementary students, has a Lexile level of 1060, which puts it on a ninth grade level. Now, would you give Diary of a Wimpy Kid to a ninth grader? Probably not, right? You're probably not going to view that as a super dense, complex, challenging text that's going to advance a ninth grader, by and large, right? If you're an English teacher, you're not running out, a ninth grade English teacher, you're not running out to buy a class set of Diary of a Wimpy Kid so you can all read and discuss it. So those are just two really good examples. Let me give you one more. A third really good example is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck's novel comes in at a Lexile level of 680, which puts it on a third grade level, okay? So while you can use Lexile levels as one way, to get a sense of what the text is like, really, you're not getting a sense necessarily of what grade level it's appropriate for. What you're getting a sense of are sentence lengths and word frequency, how common or uncommon the words are in that text, right? Are these long sentences? Are these short sentences? Is this filled with a lot of words that kids are unlikely to be familiar with? Or is it filled with a bunch of common words? That's really what you're learning when you're getting a Lexile level, okay? From there, you as the teacher have to move into a more qualitative common sense approach where you're thinking about, what is this book? Okay, what's it about? Is this appropriate content for my students? How's it going to push them and challenge them? What kind of background knowledge do my students have? What kind of interest do they have in this book? All right, because the more background knowledge or the more interest they have, right, the more accessible a text is going to be to them, or the more likely they're going to be willing to stick with a complex text if they have some necessary background knowledge or they have some kind of personal motivation in which to engage with the text. But I think the thing to know here is that when we're putting these labels on text, when we're talking about how complex a text is, we're usually talking about it. The conversations tend to be around Lexile levels, what level a text is on. And those levels are very problematic if you use them in a hard and fast manner, okay? And I don't have to tell you, because there are plenty of stories out there about teachers not letting kids have access to text because they're not on a Lexile level, or parents taking their kids to the library and demanding that the librarian tell them what Lexile level a book is, and helping their kid find a book that's on a particular Lexile level and only wanting their kids to read in that band. There are problems with that, okay? And you can see how some of that gets played out here. I think the takeaway from this is to know text complexity. We're relying heavily as a culture, we're relying heavily on it in a quantitative manner, and that's really how it's getting implemented. And it's easy to see why that's the case, because it makes the algorithm, there's an algorithm, it makes it seem very fast. It makes it, we can do it very fast. It makes it seem very neutral, right? Like this is all about how hard the words in the text are or how long the sentences are, but that's not really the case. Text complexity is really also about the content and the background knowledge and interest that students bring with them to a text. So we can't remove the student completely. But for today's question, how is text complexity determined? Systematically, right now, it's really dominated by Lexile levels, and it's implemented that way too. So I encourage you, challenge you to sort of think about how you understand text complexity, how you use these Lexile levels, or maybe you don't use Lexile levels in your instruction or to inform books you pick for your students, or what you encourage them to read. Because it's definitely an approach that's, while it has something to offer, it's also very limited, I think, in what it has to offer. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch all my videos. While you're at it, head on down to the comments and let's talk about text leveling and text complexity, and how do you see it being determined? How do you see it being enacted? What kinds of consequences does it have for you as a teacher, and what kinds of consequences does it have on your students and how they learn and engage with reading in your classroom?